Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Rooted Podcast.
Yes, sir. Man, it's been a fun start to the year.
Yeah, man.
And excited today to continue our conversation on discipleship and formation and habits and all the things. So,
Yeah. Today we're going to be talking about why we don't see the power of God in our lives many times. But before we do that, let's get through our intro today. Just want to encourage everybody that if you have questions or comments, don't forget a couple of things. One, like and subscribe wherever you consume podcast information from or consume podcast content from. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, all the things. Make sure you like, subscribe. If this episode or this podcast is helpful to you, man, share it with 3 people. We just ask you to do that. But in the link, or excuse me, in the description of the podcast, you will see a link that says have questions or comments. Click on that link. You'll be sent to a place where you can leave comments, leave questions, because every 6 or 7 weeks or so, we will do a Q&R episode. And so we'll have one of those coming up soon. But man, please do that. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to maybe talk about what you want to talk about.
Yeah.
So make sure you hit us up. So Tyler, tell everybody that may be listening for the first time what this podcast is all about.
Yeah, this podcast, there's 3 main focuses that we focus on. The first one is confront. We like getting to the root issue of different topics. The second
Hence
one,
the word rooted.
Yeah, rooted.
Yeah.
There we go. The second thing we like, confess. So confront and confess. Confess that I am a sinner and I am in need of a Savior. And the third one is construct. And what kind of spiritual formation needs to take place in my life for me to abide in Christ and grow good fruit. So
Absolutely.
That's our focus here, and that is our the things that we love to enjoy. It can get interesting at times when you confront, confess, and construct. So we're here for it, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's our main win as a church, is that every time somebody takes a next step. And so this podcast is designed to give you some next steps and some opportunities to like put something into practice, not just listen to some good information or whatever. But yeah, when we just came out of 21 days of prayer and fasting, we had our worship night this past Sunday night. I'm not sure when this episode will air, but at this time, this is the Thursday following our prayer and worship night. Incredible experience, which is something I look forward to every year. I think the last 3 or 4 years, really since coming out of COVID, I believe, has been kind of like a routine or a rhythm for us, is to walk through 21 days of prayer and fasting and then conclude with 24-hour prayer experience and then worship night. And just for you guys listening that maybe have never participated in our 24-hour prayer experience, or maybe you're a ministry leader or pastor listening from somewhere else, maybe you're wondering what that looks like. And basically all we do is we shift our entire auditorium into stations of prayer. We have some very low-key music that plays the entire time. And it's really come as you are and come and go as you please. You know, there are people, I've seen people in the 24-hour prayer experience come and go and come back several times. Like they may not stay the entire time. It's not like you have to stay the 24 hours, but we have a place, we have altars for people to pray. We actually have guided prayers for everyone too when they come in. We usually have hosts for people when they walk into the building before they go in the auditorium. And there's guided prayers. We have crosses where people can nail prayer requests or confess sin. We have candles where people can pray for intercessory prayer for maybe lost loved ones or those they're wanting to pray for. Let's see. We have silence and solitude rooms. We have, man, what's really cool is we have the prayer labyrinth.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody listening has experienced that, but it's just like this huge mat, so to speak, on the floor, and it's not a maze because you don't run into walls, but like you just basically walk and pray, and there's guided prayers that you can do that. Man, a lot of people who experience that for the first time, they're like, man, this is legit. I really enjoyed that. And then we have some places where you can pray on your face, like we have some mats on the floor, things like that. Am I missing anything?
Communion
Stations,
and one thing we added this time was the communal Bible.
Yes.
out front,
yes,
which was incredible.
That's pretty sick. So like, yeah, we bought a Bible, one of those big Bibles that have the margins you can write in. And so we just encourage people to come up if you have a favorite verse or a scripture and you want to highlight that in the Bible, and then out next to it, maybe write what it means to you. But it's cool because it's the church's Bible, and so we'll bring that out. We're actually using it with our staff prayer, but also with our church-wide prayer, so we can look back over the years and see people's highlights and writings. And so, yeah, that's been pretty cool. And we also, our entire kids ministry is turned into a place of prayer as well, where kids can actually connect and be involved. We encourage elementary kids to come in, and I think they had like every kid's name that's registered into our database on a like bouncy ball, or not a bouncy ball, but like one of those play area balls. And so the kids can actually draw a ball out of the bucket, pray over that kid, and then they put it in another bucket, which to signifies, hey, this kid has been prayed for, which is super, super cool. But man, Kelly and Preston and all those, they do an incredible job of making sure that how do we basically level down or give our kids a chance to practice what our adults are practicing. So yeah, we just came out of that, finishing all that. And so Sunday night, I'm going to tell you guys, confession, I did not come off the fast very well.
That's one thing I learned. I felt like I did a good job going into it. But I did not do a good job of coming out of it.
What's funny is I didn't drink coffee. I actually didn't like break my fast until Sunday night.
Okay.
And I was actually headed out of town. And so we were like, let's just go through a drive-through. Haven't had fast food in 21 days and got Dairy Queen. And I knew, like, I ate my ice cream first because I was like, I don't know how much further I'm going to get past this. But my stomach hurt for several days. But
you did better than I did. I did Taco Bell.
Oh man, dude.
That was Mexican pizza, a couple tacos. It was not good.
What's wrong?
Like I said, good job prepping coming in. Not so well coming out of that.
Bro, that's not even a smart decision on a good day. On a day,
I don't even be eating that at all. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, man.
Anyway,
this is my 15th year fasting. How many years have you been doing this?
Since when we started it with the church.
Okay.
And so, but this year was different and it was special in its own way.
Yeah, same.
But
that's why I tell people, like, I'm 15 years in, but every year I'm learning more and gaining more insight about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it and the motivations behind it. So
this year was just the education. I mean, our D group walked through the fasting practice and the history of fasting, how the early church used to do it, why they did it, and it's just opened my mind up, not so much of what I can get, but what I can give to the Lord. And my perspective and my motivation around fasting has just completely changed now.
Well, and shout out to all the discipleship groups and community groups that are walking through our Way series together, participating in the prayer and fasting practices through practicing the Way. So, we obviously didn't want to force people to do it, so we invited all of our discipleship groups and community groups to basically practice this together. And so that's what's been powerful, is listening to stories of people who like maybe have never fasted before, or they've tried but failed, but now they're doing it in community and they're actually seeing more success. My daughter and her friends are doing it together.
Wow.
It was cool. One of her friends actually texted her last night and was like, hey, will you guys fast with me during breakfast and lunch tomorrow?
Wow.
Praying for something specific. And I'm like, dude, that's incredible for an 8th grader.
Let's go. Yes.
I mean, how many 8th graders, texting their friends going, hey, will you guys fast and pray with me tomorrow? That's incredible.
I didn't do that in 8th grade.
Yeah. So just shout out to everybody who's making that a priority and doing that, because I do think the more involvement we get from our church corporately, our community grows in unity.
Yes.
It grows in love, and it grows in knowledge and wisdom as well. And it was funny. I was listening to, if you listen to the episode 3 of the Rule of Life podcast, they talk about the guy who was from South Africa, and he was like, here is the only place you'll see in the West, the only place you'll see in the world where it's like hyper individualism. And so like when you get into a church setting like this, just like, hey, we're going to fast. Well, we normally it's like you have a lot of people like, what do you mean we?
Yeah,
you have
who's
a mouse
we?
in your pocket? Yeah, who's we? Like, or people are like, yeah, man, that's cool,
Yeah,
man.
you
You
do
guys
that.
are going to fast and pray. Awesome. But he said it's not like that anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he grew up in South Africa. So like the church and other places in the world, when the pastor said, we're going to fast, everybody fasted.
Well, that
we're
was one
going
of
to
the
pray,
Yeah.
everybody prays.
That was one of the things that I learned through those things was like cities. Hey,
Yeah, man.
us as a town in a city, the leader would call the town to fast.
Yeah,
and it's
including
like
the animals.
yeah, everybody.
Remember?
Yeah, don't even.
Cows
Yeah,
like,
don't
what I
even-
do?
Yeah, what did I do,
Well,
man?
I got
Why-
fast.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't even know
It's
what's
like,
going on.
You ain't even eating.
Bro,
don't
yeah,
even feed
yeah.
your dog.
Yeah, don't
You
feed your dog.
But the power in doing it together, like you were
Dude,
talking about, and
it's
that unity.
incredible. And,
So,
and we're seeing a lot of what's really powerful are the people who are continuing to practice fasting as a part of their regular life.
Yes.
Post this, like I've just talked to somebody yesterday. Their small group or their community group is actually going to fast during Lent. So they're attempting a 21-day water fast
Wow.
during Lent. Yeah. And so
Dang.
that's, which if you've never done that, like every year I usually start my first 7 days with a water fast, which is incredible. I'll tell people the first 2 days is hell on earth.
Yeah.
But after that, I'm telling you, by day 4, you feel like you have superpowers. Because like most people don't realize like the 3 stages of fasting, it's like, you have 8 hours of digestion from your last meal. And then you have, and that's, so in the first 8 hours, you're walking through digestion. Then your body, when you're 16 hours in, hits ketosis. And a lot of people who've done keto diets, you know what that means. So now your body's actually shifting from burning glucose for energy to burning fat for energy. But when you hit 24 hours, your body actually hits autophagy, which is incredible. So it actually means it's like a self-eating. And so it actually says, okay, I don't have any food, because people don't realize how much energy and how much energy your body puts into digesting food.
Mm-hmm.
And so now when it's sitting there and it's at rest and it's like, okay, I don't have anything to digest, so let's work on something else.
Yeah.
And so it actually shifts that energy to your brain. So that's why like you hear people talking about having like this acute awareness when they haven't eaten in 4 days. And it also shifts to killing off bad cells in your body called zombie cells. So that's how you can actually heal yourself from certain sicknesses and diseases by actually walking through complete fast, like water fast, which is pretty phenomenal.
And that was an experience that I had for the very first time. I've done like 24-hour fast or 48-hour fast, but the way that I went into my fast this year, I didn't eat. I started on like a Saturday night, and it was Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and I think my first meal was on like noon on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And it is that first 2 days, I was like, man,
Yeah, dude.
But out of nowhere, I feel like I can go.
Well, I couldn't
run.
sleep, which they say is a side effect. Like I
Okay.
couldn't sleep because all of your energy is literally going to your brain. And so it's like I couldn't shut my mind off. So
Yeah.
I had all this energy and so I wasn't sleeping, but I felt great.
The mental fog stuff was gone away. I had energy, mental clarity, and I had never experienced that before because I was thinking, well, if you don't eat, all these things, you're just going to be just no energy, all of those things. So that was one thing that I experienced this year that I'm like, wow.
And I think you do run into that anything post 7-10 days. But they say like, to fast, they say the great window is like that 4-day, 5-day window. If you want to experience some of those benefits, but, yeah, man. So for me, even coming out of this fast, because I think, I did the first 7 days water only. And then what we normally do is like sun up to sundown. And so basically I don't eat till dinner, and so we were eating 1 meal a day at dinner and water fasting the rest of the time. But coming out of it, even my wife and I both said, like, we want to make this a regular. I tried to put this in a regular practice the last 2 years of my life, but I would do good for a little bit and then do bad. But now that we're doing it together, we say, hey, Wednesdays are our fasting day. We're going to fast together every Wednesday. And so making it a regular practice of our lives. And then, of course, trying to attempt something through Lent. Yeah. And then, of course, the first of the year. But coming out of this, what's something that you feel like is becoming a staple, or like what's probably the biggest insight you've gained out of coming out of this season of fasting?
Yeah, I think two things. One being not necessarily something that I could get out of the fast, but me giving myself to the Lord, offering myself as a living sacrifice for God. That is one thing that has stood out to me, because like, in full transparency, sometimes we go into these things it's like, okay, I'm going to fast because I want to see God do X, which is like, okay, there are some dealing with different healings or illnesses or whatever, but sometimes we have to check ourselves for our reasoning of doing it. And so I just want to have a pure heart, and that's one thing that the Lord has revealed to me of like, why are you doing this? Is it because you want this, or you want this experience, or you're just making yourself available so I can work in you? And secondly, just like how you just mentioned, me and my wife have been discussing like, hey, how can we, because she's been walking through this with her discipleship group too, and it's like, how can we make this into as who we are as a family unit? We haven't settled on a day yet. We went out of town on a mission trip to Honduras, it was like during it, our kids got sick, and so, but we have been discussing like, is it Wednesday, is it Friday? Because I love that doing it, partnering with other believers throughout the world, because those 2 days is when a lot of followers fast, and so just figuring out what day that is, but doing it alongside my wife. And it is so incredible when you get to do this and like your spouses are in this with you together, and it's not just you, it's not just them, but like we get to do this together as a couple. And there's power in that, man. The past 21 days, it's just been, it's been really good.
Even speaking to the unity, the reason why it's so important as well, you see a lot of people, it's like, well, they would call it fasting, but it's abstaining.
That was so good.
But I think we don't realize how much we are of a hindrance or a temptation to other believers when we're like, yeah, I know you're doing that, but I'm going to do this. And then it creates a lot of hodgepodge of, again, it's hyper individualism instead of saying like, how are we walking through this together as a community and doing the same thing together. And obviously that's difficult when you're raised in a culture that's like, hey, it's between you and the Lord.
You do you.
But in the Bible, it wasn't like that.
Right.
It's not just your relationship with Christ is not a personal relationship. I mean, yes, you have a personal relationship, but your faith is not just for you.
Yeah.
It's for others as well. Your whole transformation is for others. Go back to creation story.
Yeah.
We were created for relationship to rule and reign together in love, peace, harmony, joy. As God reigns in heaven, we are to reign on earth.
And I think that was so good. And another thing that I learned was like because kind of where we are, like, nobody really talks about fasting, but why is that the only practice? Like, we talk about prayer with one another. We talk about all these other practices of Jesus, but fasting, hey, no, do not talk about that because of that scripture that, hey, when you fast, don't boast, don't do all these things, but it gets taken out of context. But it's like how you said, there's so much power in the unity of it. And I think we've missed that piece. Yeah. And I think we're starting to experience that piece now too.
Yes. Well, and that leads into today's conversation because, we're talking about why we don't see the power of God in our lives. And I truly think it's because we don't surrender ourselves to hard things and hard disciplines like fasting. I'll say this, we often don't see the power of God in our lives because of the presence of excess. In the West, we have more than we need and we want more than we have.
Yeah.
So it's like we're not content. We're never content. And I'll say this for number one, I just believe the devil sits at the summit of comfort. We often reject anything that seems difficult or uncomfortable. And so when you think about, like most of us, how we seek comfort or pleasure nonstop, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I think we live in a pleasure principle society that says I have to get pleasure at all costs. And I think when we think about the good life, to us, the good life is constant bliss. It's never hardship. And so being a follower of Jesus, we can tend to think that is the end goal, is continual pleasure to where I never experience anything hard. And it's just, one, it's not in Scripture, and two, it's impossible. We weren't wired that way. And so, one of the things I try to teach my kids is always engulf yourselves in things that are difficult. It's kind of like this, and again, I'm probably getting a little ahead of myself, but I'm preaching on this coming Sunday. But it's like when you actually continually put yourself into uncomfortable positions, you actually experience more joy. And so I tell people, like, getting an ice bath is not, there's like a part of you are overriding your brain, right? You're pushing a button that your body is walking towards something that your brain is yelling, do not do this. But I tell people, it's kind of like what they call a runner's high. There's like a euphoric feeling when you get out, when you're done. And what you realize is the more that I actually run towards uncomfortability, the more joy and bliss I actually experience. It's counterintuitive to culture, which is why the kingdom is upside down. And so it's like seeing God say, like, man, going to the cross, going to death is what actually brings life.
Yeah.
Right. And so even my son, he'll be 10 in a few weeks. And so he sees me get in there all the time in the cold plunge, and he's like, Dad, I want to do that. I want to do that. And of course I'm like, man, at 9, I don't know, well, my cold plunge sits in the garage. So it kind of is, it's a little bit warmer than outside. That's about it. And so of course we just had this cold spell where we had like 4 days under freezing. And so like I'm having to like break little thin sheets of ice off the top to get in, And so the day he actually finished like first in his 4-H speech. And so he was just pumped, man. He was gassed up, and he's like, Dad, I want to do the cold plunge, So I go out there and I have like a little thermometer in there, and it was 32 degrees.
Man.
Yeah. So I'm sitting here, I'm like Googling on my phone,
How long can a child sit in ice water?
Yeah. And so I thought, he can do 30 seconds. We'll start there. And so I'm coaching him through it. I even prayed over him. It's kind of a cool moment. I just prayed over him, because I want him to feel that sense of like, I can do hard things. And man, he got in there. Of course, I sent you the video, and he gets in there. And of course, I'm teaching him how to breathe. And man, after about 10 seconds, homeboy is just at peace,
like
man.
a champ.
And so we're counting down. We get to 30 seconds, pull him out. And dude, he was so amped. And I just looked at him and I said, I just want to remind you, you can do hard things. Yeah. And actually, man, the rest of the night, you're talking about just fired up. Dude was amped up for days. Telling me, I got Nicole. And so it's like, man, he ran towards something hard, and it brought joy.
Yeah.
And I think we get it backwards sometimes. And so if we're constantly running towards pleasure, we're actually going to experience more devastation and pain, because anytime that comes down, it's the crash of an addict, right? It's the cravings of somebody who's an addict. That feeling is the feeling actually of how your brain is wired to bring you back to a sense of balance. And we don't realize that. And so, well, I
was like, and you don't experience those things unless you do those hard things. Yeah. And it's like, it's one thing to talk about it or whatever. Like I remember when I ran my half marathon a couple years ago, mile, which I was.
Yeah, you ran toward pain.
Yeah, I legit got up. I'm like, okay, if you need a couch to half marathon program,
don't follow tires.
Don't do what I did. But I got the mile 10. Steady, doing good, but my hip flexors were letting me know that I didn't train well for this. But that from mile 12 to 13, it was like, and like that was my fastest mile. And I have never experienced anything like that in my life.
That's crazy.
I was passing everybody, and I was like, "Oh my god, what is this? Why didn't I have this at mile 10?"
Yeah.
But it is so true. But because I attempted that, if I wouldn't have never now experienced that runner's high or there is a piece. I filled my tub up one time, not with ice, but I sat in it just on the coldest setting.
I filled it up with heat.
Yeah, anything under 40, I'm
a heat bath.
I'm out.
A heat plunge.
I'm out. Exactly. I was like, how cold is bath water? But it was super cold. But after a few minutes, it's like, why am I enjoying this? Because this is something that should be miserable. But like there's this calmness that comes over you, and you can't explain it unless you try it.
And it's deep when you think about Paul says that our goal should be contentment, right? And so there's something in us. I had a mentor that told me one time, he gave me this advice before we started the church, and I thought it was so good. He said, bring the highs down, bring the lows up.
Come on.
You know, because sometimes we can live in a moment and be like, man, this is the best ever. And then, but any bad thing that happens, then it crashes us, right? Or if we're walking through something hard, it's easy to be like, it's the end of the world. Instead of saying, hey, this was a bad day.
Yeah.
This was a bad moment or a season. It's not my entire life.
Yeah.
And that's how we're supposed to be. I mean, how do you think Paul gets into a position where he's in prison, he's shipwrecked, he's been beaten, all this stuff, but yet he says, man, none of it compares to me knowing Christ.
Yeah.
He had to have gotten to a place where he was content, right? That balance. That
in that place
for.
To where, like, I love just Paul's attitude of like, hey, if I'm in prison, cool. I get to preach the gospel.
Yeah, man.
If you kill me, also cool.
Yeah,
I get to go be with Jesus. And it's like,
man.
that's to just say that, but like, I feel like it was legit.
Yeah.
He was, and to get to that place in life, it's like, man. Wow, what a time.
Well, but I think in order to do that, we have to realize that transformation always comes at the edge of uncomfortability, you know? And that's what a lot of people aren't willing to do. In fact, we live our lives trying to run the opposite direction, you know, instead of actually realizing that life is more enjoyable when I'm living in the balance of pleasure and pain. Because it's interesting in the Dopamine Nation book that I had mentioned from Anna Lemke, you know, it talks about how, like, when you are unable to live at balance, you cannot appreciate the small things of life. You know, you can't. It's the person that, if you were just, like, for me to sit on the back porch and actually just watch nature, that would be like really difficult for the average addict or person, because they're like, I don't find the joy in this. And so, and I think that's why gratitude plays such a huge part of a believer's life.
Yeah.
We don't realize that, man, if you cannot be grateful or enjoy the small things of life, you probably have what's called the addictive brain. And the addictive brain is the person that's like, I've got to have this dopamine hit that is so up high, so filled with bliss and pleasure. And so any small thing, and this actually goes into the conversation we'll have in a few episodes about hitting the spiritual wall. I don't think a lot of people hit the spiritual wall. I think people hit a dopamine crash.
Oh, wow.
And I think that churchy things and things of God can actually give you dopamine hits, not spiritual health. Wow. But that's a whole nother episode. So, but yeah, man, that's the first thing, is I think we have to actually put ourselves into a place of uncomfortability. Because I think the root problem is this: excess has drained our desire for access.
That's so good. Every time I go out of the country, I realize that we have so much here in America. Like, we have so much excess. Really, not whatever we want, but like any information that we want, we can find out immediately. We can go buy things. We can have, I forgot where, I think it was Coulter last night at Youth. He was talking about most Americans have to like 6 to 8 pairs of shoes, and where normally it's 1 to 2 in other areas. And because we have all of these things, unfortunately, and I think it would be difficult for people to actually admit this, but it's like there's this era about us that, well, I have all this. Do I really need God? And again, that would be, someone's probably not going to flat out admit that. But if we're being honest with ourselves, there are times you don't feel like you need them, because you have all of these things. You have excess. You have whatever you want, whenever you want. You have access to things, to pleasure, those dopamine hits, and we miss the beauty of simple, and everything's coming from Jesus and spending time with Him.
Yeah, man.
So
that's good. Yeah, I mean, we are obsessed with consumerism, and that replaces our desire to actually access the presence and power of God. And it's a multifaceted issue, right? We have excess, we have consumerism. It's why, like, you know, the iPhone 16 won't be enough. There has to be a 17, and you got to have that because the 16 is not enough, and the 18 and the 19. And I mean, and they have figured it out. They figured out how to, because I mean, if you were to say, I'm going to be content with this phone, well, if you want this phone to do all of these things, you're going to have to upgrade because this phone doesn't offer that. Because there is a part of you just like looks back and it's like the iPhone was one of the greatest inventions of all time. And yet, in that moment, you're like, we have peaked as a society. We have arrived. And now here we are, 17 versions later?
Right. And
it's like, that phone, that was never enough. It was never enough to like listen to music and talk on the phone or text or do these things and or watch entertainment on your phone, right? Yeah. Wherever you could go. And now it's like, now you got to have a camera that can shoot like movies. You got to be able to take pictures like a professional photographer. It's so funny because I'll even think like, man, look at the quality on this. And it's like, bro, I'm not a photographer. Yeah, like, I don't sit around like looking. I don't even know what a professional pic, you know what I mean? Like, that's why I pay somebody else to take our pictures, you know? So we act like, man, look at what I could do with my phone. It's like, no, bro, you ain't Steven Spielberg.
Yeah,
you know, there's still an art to this. You know what I mean?
The consumerism thing too is, and this is a silly example, but the other day my wife showed me this video of this girl, and I'm not kidding you, she probably spent several $100s on just supplies to wash her hands. And it was like it was insane. And I sit here, she's like, look at this. I'm like, I'm not, and it was probably a 20-minute ordeal with different lotions, creams, gloves, soaps, all of this stuff. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, I appreciate clean, you know, I wash my hands, but like, do you feel like you have to spend this time and all of this money on, it was ridiculous. I mean, brushes, cleaning, I mean, it was insane. But there are people who really feel like if I don't have all of these things, if I don't do all of these things, then my hands aren't clean. Yeah, bro. And it's like, no, bro, what do you just...
Well, so there's a I haven't watched it yet, but my friend Jason Ball was telling me about a documentary called Don't Die.
Okay.
Apparently it's either on Netflix or Prime right now. I can't remember which one. But it's a dude who's basically like trying to avoid aging. And he spends $2 million a year on his health, like trying to like prevent aging. And basically he says that he's decreased his aging process to like, for instead of every day being a day, it's like 0.6.
I saw this trailer. My in-laws showed me this trailer. Okay. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But I'm sitting here like, this dude, what if he gets hit by a car?
Yeah.
You know, like, his most spends $2 million a year. But going back, the whole point is like, we are consumers. You know, we live in excess. We got to have more. It's not enough just to be like, hey, let's eat healthy and exercise so we can live a good life. It's like, how do I reverse life, you know? And we also want the quick fix.
Yeah.
You know, I think Big Pharma has destroyed our country. That's a whole nother episode. But, you know, in the Bible, it's funny because you used to actually have to pray for any illness, you know, because you didn't have
a choice.
All these medicines and drugs and a commercial every 15 minutes talking about a new pill, you know, but then they kind of speed through the, you know.
Side effects maybe. Your legs may fall off.
Bleeding out of your retina. All this stuff. But it's funny how, like, in the Bible, prayer is the first response. In a culture of excess, it's the last response.
Yes.
You know, so we don't have access to God. We don't experience the power of God. Because he is just he is the supplement now.
Yeah.
Used to it was prayer. I remember what Paul told Timothy, hey, if your stomach's messed up, prayer with a little bit of wine to help your stomach. And now it's like drugs with a little bit of Jesus.
Wow.
You know, so plus we're obsessed with image.
Yeah.
I mean, you can watch, I watched a documentary on fasting, but it had nothing to do with God, nothing to do with the Bible. It was all about health. You know, because we are obsessed with image, we're obsessed with aestheticism. I think maybe you're listening, and I've been there, so this is no guilt or condemnation or shame. But I think there are people who experience fasting, and they watch the scale the entire time. And all they really got from it was, hey, I lost 15 pounds.
Yeah.
Instead of like, yes, that was great. I think it goes hand in hand. There's not one greater than the other. But because you can pray without fasting and you can fast without praying, but if you really want to experience the power of God, you bring the two together.
Come on.
And that's when you'll experience the power of God. And kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, the other issue is we live in a highly addicted society. Listen, I want to say this with all love and sincerity. The number one reason why many people do not attempt fasting, it's not just because it's hard. It's not because they don't believe that it works, or it's not because they don't even want to do it. We are addicted to food. We're addicted to sugar, caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, you name it. We are addicts. For those of you that's like, man, I've never had an addiction problem, just because you're not on a particular drug or alcohol, sugar is a drug. There are certain things. I've even heard people talk about the difference between bread in America and bread in like Europe. Like if you go to like Italy and eat bread with your pasta, it's not the same kind of substance as you're going to get with the highly processed bread here in America. Because people are like, well, Jesus ate bread. Yeah, but he didn't eat American bread. He's not eating this stuff.
He's not eating stuff that's going to last for 6 months.
Bro, yeah. And that's the thing. Like if you made food like that from scratch, it's not going to last as long. That's why you made enough to last you for a few days or whatever, but you didn't have a loaf of bread in there for 3 weeks or whatever.
During a couple of days ago, my mother-in-law, she makes homemade bread, and we had it with a meal, and then like within a day or two, there was a little bit left over. We had to throw it out because it was stale, but it was because it didn't have all these preservatives in it for it to last 3 to 6 weeks or however long. And it was good. Like it's fresh. There is a difference.
Well, and at the heart of it, here's what I want people to hear. We are looking for something to love. Because that's what dopamine does. It's like a trigger that says, oh man, I love this. I love this feeling. I love this thing. The problem is we haven't tried Jesus.
Yeah.
We see Jesus as non-substance. But I want to remind people, he's more real than the food you put in your stomach.
Come on.
He's better than the sugar high, because when I get done with being in his presence, guess what? I don't feel like trash, and I don't need more trash in order to feel good.
Yeah.
Because that's what sugar does to you, or that's what your drug of choice does to you, your dopamine hit. It says, man, when I'm done with this, I'm going to come way down, and I actually need more of the thing to bring you back up. And that's not true with Jesus, man. You don't have a Jesus crash when you try Jesus. And that's what's powerful about it. He's real. And that's the problem, is we don't see him as a non-substance. We see him as a non-substance. He's real. And when I actually believe that and put that into my body, my mind, and my spirit, I experience the power of God.
Yeah. And that was a question I was going to ask. It's like even kind of going back to the runner's high, or that peace you have in a cold plunge. Like, have you tried making yourself available to experience Jesus? And I'm not just talking about an emotional time at church or whatever. I'm talking about like having yourself in a position and experiencing God. And again, it's one of those things like, once you experience it, you're like,
get hooked, bro.
Oh, that's what it is.
Man.
Yeah, and you go back for more.
I can't wait to get up in the mornings. I can't wait, to do my bedtime routine, because I know, man, I'm about to like spend some time in the presence of God. My midday prayer, all the things, like you get hooked on it, man. And it's not just hooked on, like it's not, and it's hard to explain because it's not like a dopamine hit. It's more of like it is more of like eating a meal that's going to give me energy to boost me forward. And so, it's hard to explain, but like I said, you're not going to experience the crash or whatever. You're actually going to want more of Jesus.
Yes. That's so good.
Because I know a lot of people there are a lot of people, man, who love to intermediate fast. There's a lot of people who are trying to hang on to like new health, they're going to try to break the aging code or the diet code or whatever. Now you got people taking diabetes medicine to lose weight, when they don't have diabetes. And it's like, I think there's a lot of us that would do those things to lose weight, but not to lose greed or lust or, whatever it is in the flesh that we need to lose in our lives to gain Christ. Jesus told his disciples in John 4, he said, I have food you know nothing about. There is something that happens when you realize that Jesus was telling the truth when he said, man cannot live by bread alone, that this stuff it's better than
Yes.
bread and life.
It's ironic that you bring that up because that's the very passage that I used at FCA at the high school yesterday morning.
Yeah.
And what the descriptors when Jesus talks about with the woman there at the well, what does he say? It is a fresh, bubbling spring within them. And it's like, I've read that, but I've never paid attention to like, oh, and so you can only imagine when she went back into the town to share what she has experienced, she was probably, she was a fresh, bubbling spring that happened within her. And they're like, oh, if we got to go check that out for ourselves. And then they ended up getting saved because they were spending time with Jesus. And so like, dude, that's so good.
Yeah, man. Well, as we finish things out, I just want to encourage people who are listening, like especially if you walk through the 21 days of prayer and fasting. If you haven't, I would highly encourage you to start. I think some resources that we would recommend. One is like the resource that we're walking through as a church together, at least the majority of us are. And that's the Practicing the Way material, practicingtheway.org. They actually have the fasting practice. It's 4 weeks. So if you had a small group or something that you want to do for 4 weeks on the fasting practice, and you have like challenges throughout the week, and it could be something simple. I think the first week that is challenge you to fast one meal that week. But man, it's been great to watch people learn and do that practice together. It's also available on Right Now Media. And by the way, our church offers that for free. And so you can actually tap into the church's account, and it's like Netflix for Bible studies, but the Practicing the Way stuff is on Right Now Media. The book by Arthur Wallace, which is God's Chosen Fast, simple yet profound book on fasting. And then I would just highly recommend any of the prayer books by Pete Greig. He is actually the founder of 24/7 Prayer Global. And so, man, all of his books on prayer are phenomenal, including how to hear God, how to pray, and why God doesn't answer prayers. He has a book called God on Mute, and it is such a profound book on why sometimes our prayers are not answered. But I just want to challenge people, man. Reason why you're not seeing the power of God in your life is because you're not putting yourself in position for God to actually reveal himself, reveal his power. And a lot of times it's not going to be found in the place of comfort. It's going to be found in the place of discomfort. Yeah. And we have to seek that out. And so I know for our church, we're also challenging people for Lent. Maybe you want to incorporate a fast for 40 days of some sort, and then maybe feast on Sundays. Maybe you want to start incorporating a fast consistently as a practice. Like I said, me and my wife are doing Wednesdays. But also incorporate a fast as a response to major prayer. Maybe you've got something serious or a crisis going on in your life. We talked about this in the series that, man, throughout history, people have fasted for two main reasons, for a rhythm and for a response. They fasted as a particular rhythm of their life to seek God in prayer and offer themselves, but also as a response to a crisis, sickness, whatever it may be. Yeah. So, you got any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just again from my experience, and I just want to encourage everybody to start small and stay consistent with that.
That's good.
Don't overwhelm yourself, like how you mentioned. I think in that video, it's like do one meal. Like don't. Make yourself available for one meal, and then maybe do sun up to sundown, and then maybe a 24-hour or 48-hour or whatever it might be. But what you do start, just be consistent in that, and give that your best. And I promise you, God will reveal himself to you for sure.
So before we hop off here, just want to remind you, if you enjoy the podcast, guys, please like, subscribe, share. If this episode was helpful, share it with 3 people right now. Just shoot them a text, send them a link. Don't forget, in the podcast description, you're going to see a link that you can click on that says have questions, or you can submit your questions or comments. Again, every 6 or 7 weeks, we'll do a Q&R episode. We'd love to answer any questions you have, talk about subjects that you want to talk about. So please do that before you hop off of here. And then we just want to remind you, as we always say, if you want the fruit,
you have to get to the root.
God bless you guys.
See you guys.